going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatics podcast. You're tuning in on the Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube channel as well as Instagram here today. We are back with episode 33. I know it's been quite some time since we've uploaded on the podcast platform. Still uploading every week as far as the weekly shows. You can find Blake, Coach, and Shane every Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. You can find myself as well as Blake after every BC Lions post game. But I know I have been a little absent from the podcast episodes. That has been, for a reason, taking a little bit of break, going into the CFL season, doing the weekly shows. Felt like, didn't really need a, weekly podcast dropping. And seeing as it is August 5th, I wanted to get into our U Sports, preview type thing with U Sports season starting in less than a month. And I thought today would be a good idea to get this guy on the podcast, chat a little bit about his program as well. Former teammate of mine, former CJFL, All-Star. I know never got credentialed, but CJFL All-Star defensive back. Went to the University of Toronto and now coach for the University of Windsor. But before we introduce our guest on today's podcast, just want to remind everybody, if you guys enjoyed today's podcast, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Head over to the Instagram. I believe we're up over 824 followers on the Instagram. So head over there, please. Let's try to push us over 1,000. I believe we're at 215 subscribers on the YouTube. So let's try to push that to, maybe 250 or so by the kickoff of U Sports season. So, like I was saying, the start of U Sports is around the corner. Teams will start to get into camp here in the next few weeks with preseason games kicking off. I would say, I believe it's not before Labor Day, but as Labor Day kind of comes and goes, teams will start to begin their preseason action and then get into regular season when school comes. So, like I was saying, former teammate of mine with the Vancouver Island Raiders. I know he spent some time with the London Beefeaters as well. Ontario native. Went to the University of Toronto, played some defensive back there as well, and now defensive assistant with the University of Windsor Lancers. I'd like to introduce on today's podcast, Isaiah Johns. Zay, my man,
Hey,
thanks
how's
for
it
joining
going?
us. How you doing?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing very well, dear, very well. Excited to, reconnect again. It's been a while since we were able to chat, but excited to just talk some ball, my man, as I know you love to do. And for those that Zay, nickname for Isaiah. You can obviously call him Isaiah, you can call him whatever you want. But for those that are probably maybe a little bit confused or whatever, caught off guard by calling him Zay, just what I'm most familiar with calling him by and how you'll hear me calling him on today's podcast. So, former teammate of mine, we played with the Vancouver Island Raiders back in 2018. Zay's last year, unfortunately, came out to VI with only 1 year of eligibility in junior, and then went back out to Ontario. Committed to the University of Toronto, got to play one season of U Sports out there, and then I believe kind of took his time. I don't believe got into the coaching game right away, and then kind of dove right in. I believe in that 2022 season with the University of Windsor, and has been in the program ever since. And kind of broke through this offseason. Was able to get get some experience in the pro level, that sort of thing. So I was really interested and really excited to kind of pick his brain and just hear about his journey in football so far. So, Zay, if you don't mind, buddy, let's take things back and maybe introduce yourself a little bit for those that aren't aware. Obviously, like I mentioned, you grew up in Ontario there, but maybe tell the people about, hometown, kind of parents, siblings, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so appreciate it, man. Appreciate you having me on here. I kind of bounced around a little bit everywhere growing up. So I'm one of three in my family. Lived in Oakville, and that's actually where I was born, and then bounced around between London and Mississauga at a young age. I was small, so even though it's me and three, like my brother was like 5'11" towards the end of his high school career. My sister was like close to towering on me. So like didn't really have that genetic gene in me. And going into football, it was something where I didn't play until the ninth grade. I had hoop dreams until I stopped growing, and I think the Filipino gene hit me a little bit harder than anything. But going into grade 9, I was like 5 feet, 100 pounds, and there we ended up. I had a couple guys who ended up playing pro ball, but I would go to practice and just get ragdolled. It was one of those things where I kind of was a receiver that didn't love contact, as most receivers do. So I just found a way to continue playing, but I loved it. I loved the aggression. I loved going into practice. I loved just working. And that was kind of my high school correction. Grade 9, I played back at Regina Mundi Catholic School, who unfortunately don't have a football program anymore, but that's in London, Ontario. My grade 10 season was actually when I started to play a little bit more. The only thing is we had a stud running back. So again, I was a wide receiver catching slants, bubbles, and screens. I wasn't really doing too much outside of that. Then actually midway through my grade 10 season, I moved out to Windsor, and lived in a little town called Amherstburg, and actually played for my summer football coach, Glenn Mills. And he'll tie back into this story just because he was kind of one of those guys where, very old school, pound the rock. And based on us doing that season with our coaching staff, we ended up having the number 1, 3, and 9 rusher in our conference that year. I was a receiver on that team, so if you were gonna block, you were great for the scheme. If you were not, then you weren't. So again, didn't really play a whole lot. But my grade 11 season, I got to be with Coach Mills, and it helped me kind of there learning, different tactics, learning different things, and getting tough coaching, which was one thing that helped me really develop, I think, as a player going back to London. Although throughout that time, like I said, I was always a small dude. Like towards the end of my high school career, I think the tallest I was ever was like 5'6", 5'7". I might be reaching, and probably 175. The heaviest I was ever at 185. So like I wasn't a towering force at all. But I just love the game. I loved the team aspect of it. I loved getting to compete every day, and I to this day still love it. So ended up just doing that. Came back to London just because my mom's job had us transferred kind of back and forth. So now I'm back in London, back at my old school in Regina Mundi in grade 12, and I am on a very bad high school football team. We don't win a single game. However, this is the first time where I'm actually getting to be a starter on a team. So it's pretty cool. I'm playing free safety. We're just getting blown out by everybody. And it was tough because that was the year where London went to Catholic and public. So all the Catholic teams were fairly strong. There were a few guys that actually got their taste with the pros that we play against. And doesn't matter what we do out there. There's instances where, our quarterback's taking a knee on the 1 yard line to the end zone. All of a sudden we're turning over the ball. We're not able to really move the ball offensively, and defensively we're struggling. So that happens. I'm trying to get next level looks. It's not happening because not only am I small, but I'm on bad football teams. And then my 5th year, the guy who was supposed to play quarterback actually just says, I don't want to do it. So who steps in? They turn to me. And luckily I have, an offensive line that one day ends up being talented with a bunch of U Sport guys, right? I have twin brothers on either side of the O-line. I've just got a savvy veteran playing center. I've got another guy who ends up going to Simon Fraser playing guard, so we're loaded. So all I really got to do is make sure I don't get hit back there, which they do a great job of protecting me up front. So then my 5th year, they realize, okay, RMC is getting dominated by everybody. We're going to change the conferences. We end up going to the B division and actually doing fairly well. We're 5-2 or 6-2, whatever. End up going to playoffs, bounce in the first round. But at least then I get the exposure. And now all of a sudden people are looking at me like, okay, this guy might be able to do something. Get a few interest from some smaller OUA schools. Then all of a sudden, don't play. So I actually don't play football after that. I take a year off, going to first year university, kind of do my thing there, and really I have one of my best friends to this day is in my ear. You got to play ball. You got to play ball. Like, nah, man, I can't afford it. Can't go away to school. It's like, what about junior? So that's where junior ball actually starts. And I reach out to London Beefeaters probably 4 weeks before camp starts. And I go, hey, I want to play. And they go, okay, you got to come out to practice and train. So then I'm like, again, 4 weeks out, just off the couch, grinding, whatever. Ends up week 1, I'm lined up against, Malcolm Carter, who was like the 6'6" wide receiver, ended up going to the Montreal Alouettes. Week 1, I'm playing corner. I'm just like, what is going on here? Like, there's no chance. Like, I not only didn't play a lot of DB in high school, but now I'm matched up against this athletic freak. So then I'm pumped because I come downhill, they throw a hook, and I'm like, come downhill. Then they hit me with a double move to score a touchdown the next play. I'm like, damn it. And that happens and kind of struggle. Sorry, I cut you off, David.
Oh no, all good. I was gonna say you live and you learn, brother. You live and you learn.
So yeah, so then my 2016 season is my first season of junior ball, and that's where I'm learning what I can actually play, what I'm actually having success with. I'm trying to figure out myself as a player because I understand I'm a smaller dude, but I played so many different positions in football. It's actually helping me understand the game a little bit better. Then midway through kind of that off season of 16, I start talking to the London Beefeaters, and I tell them I'm interested in exploring other options. That's when the whole release thing comes up. But I'm not granted it just because I'm kind of coming to them in a tough spot. I know I'm going to be in a bigger leadership role next year because I had success the previous season. Ended up getting a couple picks and doing my thing. So then I'm like, okay, but I'm training and doing everything at Western. So midway through 2017, I'm actually on Western. Now, I'm saying that loosely because our secondary was loaded. We had so many guys. That was the 17 year where Western went to the Mania and won. And they were dominant. Like Jesse McNair, CFL, combine guy, Jordan Bolio, who his brother Christoph, now with
For the
BC.
Lions.
Yeah. So like he was like more physical, but he was just dominant. Hakeem Johnson, again, former BC Lion guy.
We obviously have a small connection there. I obviously, as you know, Jeremy Chang. We all went to school with Malik Bessiger, who was obviously on that squad, was a receiver. So I remember tuning in for some of those games, man, and just the roster from top to bottom, man, was like you mentioned, a lot of CFLers and just even guys that didn't make it. I think of some of those receivers that kind of you were talking about, even Malik himself, a lot of skilled guys, a lot of talented guys that just for whatever reason had their good careers, had their great careers, but just for whatever reason wanted to call it a career at the end of their U Sports journey, or just didn't find the right opportunity. But I do remember some of those teams watching some of their run to the Vanier, man. A uber talented group for sure.
It was insane. It was insane, like top to bottom. So like I'm buried on this thing. Like you could flip a page and like my name is nowhere on any roster. Like go look it up because it's not there. But I was there. I was there and I was training with the guys and doing it, kind of doing that split thing that some junior ball clubs do, where you get the exposure, you get to practice with the guy, give him looks and stuff. And so did that. And Joe Cercelli and JP Cercelli were actually coaches on that staff back in 17. So do that in 17, actually hurt my knee, have really bad bursitis. My knee blows up like a baby's head. Week 2, in the practice after our week 2 game, I collide with one of my teammates. He's playing free safe, or I'm playing free safety. He's playing corner. I'm tracking a ball. He doesn't see me. Boom. And he's done. So I played 2 games in our playoff game in 17 for the Beefs. And then when that happens with Western, I'm essentially useless to them. I can't really do too much for them other than show up to film and just be a good teammate. So ultimately, go ahead.
Say, but before we go on from there, I'm curious, hearing a little bit more about your journey. Obviously, we became familiar with each other in 2018 and got to play a season with each other. But that's when you look at the 27 years old, 28 years old. That's not a lot of time
Yeah.
in our time here. So hearing about your journey a little bit more, and something that I respected, from you personally, your game right away was the work ethic that you carried, and you talked about joking about your Filipino genes not really maybe giving you much help, and you also
Nope.
talked about kind of being a little bit smaller, 5'6", 5'7", 100 pounds or whatever. Where do you credit maybe that work ethic that was maybe instilled in you? Was that maybe your parents kind of instilling in that from you from an early age, or where did you pick that up from?
Yeah, no, it was definitely my parents. So my parents were both, my biggest supporters, my biggest fans. through everything, but they pushed me. They pushed me hard. It was usually in the classroom, truthfully, when it started off. Like if I came back with a grade, lower than an 80, it was almost seen as like a disappointment. And I'm not saying that just to be, that funny kind of Asian dude. It's like that was the standard. That was kind of how you had to do things. So when sports, it was the same thing. My dad thought I was too small, but would continue to show up to every practice. My mom hated seeing me get hit, but she was still at everything. And it was almost that motivation. My brother was such a good high school player. Like to this day, Football Ontario still uses his photos for some stuff because he was like, I don't know, 5'11", maybe high 170s coming out of high school, but just would go up and attack the ball. First team All Canadian wide receiver. So it's like I was almost trying to catch him and I was older, right? So trying to just that fuel, that extra thing to the fire, it was the standard of like, I'm not supposed to be here, but I'm going to push myself because my parents are always saying, this is the standard. This is what you want to do. Go out, work, everybody.
Love it. So, getting back into things now here, Zay. We were talking about off camera there is I was curious to kind of pick your brain from a Football Ontario side. You mentioned it. Now, obviously, you're I believe involved with the U16 and stuff like that. I'm curious now. I think BC is first of all catching up to. I feel like Ontario probably was when maybe you were a little bit younger. But can you talk about with your experience, especially being involved now coaching, the development and coaching I guess resources that you can get there out in Ontario and compare it to when you grew up. Now I feel like kids now like with us growing up or with kids growing up now, there's 3 or 4 opportunities for them to play on different 7-on-7 teams or things like that, get training, etc. Right? Where when I was a kid, there was none of. Speaking specifically for the island, which is a little bit different to all of BC, I think there was probably a little bit more opportunity over on the mainland, Vancouver and stuff like that. But speaking, specifically to where I am, the island, there's no opportunities for stuff like that. I'm not too sure how it was for you in terms of 7-on-7 skill work, that sort of stuff. But now seeing is that I know you kind of got into I believe that's how you first got into coaching kind of a little bit, I believe, is with the skill side and then kind of branched into with some of these programs. So how have you seen it get better, and then how have you seen it kind of evolve since you were a kid?
Yeah. I've definitely seen, I guess, football get better. I think just because the development of like high performance training is, you know, uh, so easily accessible, right? You can not only go on Instagram and find videos based on what you want to play, how you want to develop, what coaches are trying to tell you. But you can find trainers, which is like almost unheard of. Like I remember for me, I was always just messaging the older guys, being like, "Hey, like, do you want to train? Do you want to get in work? Do you want to do all this?" And it helped me because it helped me accountable, and I knew like I wasn't touching those guys, but for them to take the time out of their day to actually get to work with me was more important because now it's social media is such a big factor that I think, and this is like the old, I guess the old guy uh, in me kind of talking. Like the kids don't understand what they have access to at all. So that's the one thing I think now when it comes to 7-on-7, when it comes to summer ball, when it comes to skill training, whatever you want to focus on, you can. I think the hard part now is just because there's so much of that, the whole recovery part of it and the whole time off, or maybe skill development if you want to play other sports to help develop your craft. That's where sometimes it's lost, or kids don't know what to focus on, and or parents don't know what to focus on just because they don't have the expertise. So I think that's the only thing that's changed for me. But I think it's all good things. It's really just what specifically on Ontario, what do you want to focus on, right? In the summer, these kids can play, like you said, 7-on-7, go on all these states tours, play at different venues, which is exposure that a lot of people probably didn't have access to going back, 5, 10 years ago. But on top of that, they can play Ontario summer football, and that can start as young as like U12. So you're telling me you're going to play minor football in the fall, then you have summer football. Like that's a huge amount of padded football that you're playing throughout the year. So it's good if that's what you want to do, but it's also like, where do these kids have downtime to recover their body, to grow, to fuel it? properly. Like that's the hard part. Oh, I think you're mute. Oh, there you go.
Muted there. Um, as you're saying about the summer ball, that's essentially like playing a CFL season if we're thinking about it, right? Starting, I'm not too sure when summer ball starts, but say it starts in, May, June, and you're going all the way up until fall ball. You're playing until, Grey Cup time when it's in October, November. Definitely hard on the kids' bodies for sure. And definitely a tricky balance to, remind them that, you are still a kid and you still got to enjoy the things of, going to hang out with your friends and enjoying that sort of time with, as well as balancing kind of, some of these kids' goals are to, go professional or whatever, and it's definitely a hard balance to try to stay disciplined as well as enjoy your childhood because you only have one experience, one childhood. So let's get into it. You talked a bit about going into the London Beefeaters, kind of grinding your way up into being a little bit of a contributor, and that 2017 season of starting to maybe ask about your release. What went into that? And then I guess two-part question here. What brought you out to Vancouver Island?
So yeah, I went to ask for my release. I think because actually in 2016 we missed the playoffs with the London Beefeaters, which seeing their success that they've had recently would probably be surprising to most people because we lost our last regular season game to the GTA Grizzlies, and then my football season was done. So it was one of those things where I didn't know what our success was going to be like going into 2017. I wanted to compete. I wanted to play at a higher level. That's why I asked for the release early. When I wasn't granted it, I knew because there was a rule that may have recently changed. They were going to be forced to give it to me at the end of the 2017 season, regardless of what happened. So I was granted that, and then I was trying to decide where I wanted to go. So it was between VI Langley, believe it or not, and the Edmonton Huskies. Langley, Coach Snoop actually came out because he was looking at myself, but there was also another local kid that my brother played with that I met in kind of like met and talked to him in London. He came all the way down, so that was big. It's just VI. One thing that people may not remember is VI going on and winning. The Cullen back in 2017. So I was like, okay, if this team won 17, this team's gonna be pretty good. And looking at kind of the roster, I'm like, there's gonna be, depending on what happened with Paisley at the time, I'm like, we might, I might have a spot here in a really good secondary. So I just talked to Doug Hawking at the time. Me and him clicked right away. He was just like a football junkie, just wanted to talk ball. I would call him or text him for whatever. Glenn Cook welcomed me with open arms. They took care of me when I came down to spring camp. And I think once I finally got that taste of like Raider ball at spring camp and the environment and played well, then I'm like, yeah, I'm sold. Yeah, I'm coming out here. My parents didn't love me taking, a semester off of school to do it. But I said, like, I got one shot at this. I'm going to go play at a higher level just because in Ontario, we got 11 universities that play ball. BC, you guys had two. Now you have one. So it's like, if you're not good enough to play at that school, where are you going to play?
And it's right in your backyard. I agree. I'm curious. Something that I kind of don't know how I forgot, but with your ties to the London Beefeaters here, I'm curious if there's anything that maybe I don't want to get you in any sort of trouble or whatever, but is there any maybe thoughts on kind of the LJ, I believe it's Dyer situation? I believe he was a former London Beefeater, kind of going through the. I know you got through the release period with a better experience than he did, but I know he's going through it. I don't believe he's playing ball still currently, and might have to miss the season due to kind of that release rule. And it's not even maybe a fault to the London Beefeaters program, more so a CGFL rule issue, more so than anything. But just a rule I think is a little bit outdated. And just any thoughts on that, Zay? Seeing as that you have a little bit of experience with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think for anybody who's in, his situation, it's really just making sure that you understand the rules and understand the program that you're coming from. Right. I know LJ kind of through passing, just because he went to the same high school as my brother and my sister. So I don't really know the full extent of that whole discussion. But I also know when it comes to the rules, like unfortunately, that is the rule book. That's kind of how things are drawn out. And I say the best thing is if anybody's kind of in that situation, make sure you look, at what it is and do it. That's the only reason why I even explored that avenue, because I'm going to make sure I understand this. I dot my I's, I cross my T's, just because if it goes sideways, at the end of the day, it's not going to change anything for myself, right? I know what I need to do. I know where I want to be. And it was really just a fluke that I ended up at VI, because I could have easily worn, it would have been black and gold at that time and went and played for the AKO Fratman, if the opportunity was right.
It's crazy how things could change for sure. So, Zay ends up coming to Vancouver Island, and I remember him very vividly. I remember this wasn't on me, thankfully, so I will include that. But I remember Zay making a play in spring camp on starting quarterback Jake LaBerge, now offensive coordinator. I believe it took it back to the house, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So, like you mentioned about, a very good secondary. I grew up with Jeremy Chang. I grew up watching, G, understanding who Paisley was and kind of who else was in that secondary. So, to add another guy in the secondary with, a guy like Reamer, like you mentioned about Coach Hawk, a guy that loves ball, former CFLer, won a Grey Cup, back in the day, was, head coach / kind of had his hand on the pulse of the defense as well, with Reamer calling the plays. To you to kind of get dropped in like that, obviously coming off the column where, not to, discredit or kind of take anything away from our offense, but a very defensive minded team and a very defensive dominant team was that 2017 that, I believe, I want to say held that West Shore 2017 in the column to, one touchdown, a couple field goals, with a lot of good guys on that roster as well. So coming into the, this defense, what were your excitement levels and what were your expectations, I guess, going into that season?
Yeah, I think it was one of those things where I did my research on Hawk, and I'm like, I need to learn how this guy does everything. And I definitely got caught up in the, Andrew Harris story pretty early on, just to be like, wow, this guy made it. Again, seeing what a specimen he was coming out of high school, like I said before, that was not me at all. But it was cool, at least going into that environment, because of how I think the family aspect of it, guys fed off of it. So like I showed up in July and guys were already doing off-season workouts together. And that was just like the standard. I think we did like an off-season workout, then like the next week we had a fantasy draft together with the boys, and like because everybody was scrambling for Wi-Fi, we did that like a Tim Hortons, So that was kind of, it was all like football oriented. Everyone was very together. And my expectation coming in was we were going to do exactly that. Just repeat. We were dominant. I was hearing all this talk about all the receivers that we had, because it would have been North, we had Mike West, we had Braun,
Eli.
Yeah, Jake, yourself, like we just had dudes across the board. So I was literally just excited to kind of do what exactly we did the last season and just help wherever I could. Because I don't know if you remember this, my roommate was the guy I was competing with a spot for. So we didn't talk for maybe like a week or two, because we didn't want to get too cute or too friendly in case one of us won that spot and the other guy was riding the bench the entire year.
Yeah, so you end up coming out here. I do remember a lot of those, early workouts. I remember going to, Parksville Beach. I don't know if you remember that, and kind of Hawk putting us through a circuit and stuff like that. And like you mentioned, that was just the standard of, people trying to get in as early as they can with, obviously, junior football. I would say, a lot of teams half to, maybe a third of your roster is out of province, out of town at least. So, getting those guys in early and kind of building that foundation, building that camaraderie, all that sort of stuff, I feel like helps you later in the season, the September, October games where you're, you've seen these guys now for 3-4 months every day. You're waiting to, the practice fights start to add up, stuff like that. But your brothers at the end of the day, right? I'm curious now to take back from like a memory perspective. What are some, for us to kind of, banter about here? What are some maybe memories that jump out to you? You could start off the field, you could start on the field, but Junior football for me, man, is kind of, I'm sure why you tell a lot of kids to play it as well. Some of the best years of my life and some of the best memories of my life of, some of those bus rides up to Oki and Kamloops and stuff like that.
Oh,
Buses breaking down, all that sort of stuff. So things that I'll remember for the rest of my life, and like you, right, will bring smile to my face. I'll hold those memories, very fondly for the rest of my days. So, what are some memories, especially for you, a guy that came out to Vancouver Island, was literally exploring some of these places for the first time, and some of these amazing places we have to offer. So what were some memories for you? Doesn't even have to be about football. It could be Moran singing on the bus, whatever it may be. Is there any memories that jump out to you specifically there?
yeah, I'm trying to think, okay, what can I say and not get myself in trouble here
Yeah.
and protect the rest of the Raiders? No, I think yeah, so those are all good ones. That bus trip, oh my gosh, like to this day, I say I never want to travel to Kelowna again because of what were we on the bus for? 16 hours? Or it was something wild. Two buses broke down, the side of the
Helicopters.
Coquihalla. Helicopter, yeah, like three people in ICU, like one person may have passed. Like it was insane, just this. And I swear we got on the bus at like 6 a.m. and it was 8 p.m. and we got at the hotel. And our game was supposed to start at like 6 p.m. It got pushed to the next day. So it's like we
And
travel all this way just to not play at the Apple Bowl. Okay, that's awesome.
I think those are, like you talked about too. Those are moments where you kind of even build bigger bonds with your teammates, right? 16 hours on a bus. I know there are some periods of time we were able to get out and stretch our legs, play some games on the side of the highway there, but for a lot of the time we're kind of occupying ourselves, entertaining
Watching the
ourselves. So it's
Mummy.
yes, yes. So it's those moments, man. Like I mentioned, that I will never forget, and kind of hold fondly. And I tell a lot of these guys now, going out to Raiders practice and stuff like that, man. Just I know it's hard to do, but be where your feet are and try to live in the moment as much as you can, because it's unfortunate, but those moments go like that. And in the snap of the finger, man, I know you got a year on me, but last year, having the last group of guys that I played with age out, was a moment for me that I was like, man, it's been 5 years since I played now. This is a little bit weird, and just how time's flying, just to remember those moments, because once they're over, you're not able to get them back, except for the old memory bank upstairs. But I'm curious now to kind of tie back into a coaching staff kind of resources perspective. You talked a bit about the off-season training and stuff like that. I don't know if you were a prime guy or not, but
Yep.
getting to come in with a guy like Hawk, who was the head coach, CFLer, a guy like Reamer, who was very professional about the way he handled things on the defense, very carried his weight for sure on the defense, and wasn't a guy that just was a passenger to Hawk. So how did do you think you utilize kind of the resources here in VI with the strength and conditioning program, the standard that was set here, and then with the coaching staff as well, and how it was able to make you better as a player?
Yeah, yeah. So I will say when I was out there in Nanaimo, I think I lived just off Departure Bay. I'm bad with kind of where we were at now. I remember being at the top of a hill and I didn't have a car. So I was hopping in guys' cars just to go to Prime. I would bus down to the Tim Hortons at kind of the cross, and then
Yeah.
my teammate at the time at Cox would pick me up and we would go together. He would drive me there and then he'd drop me back off the bus stop and I go home. But it was awesome because the facility was like top notch. We're going there. I'm getting in work. I think it was anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week, and then doing my own field session with whoever again could pick me up. But if I couldn't get a ride, I remember missing. I really hope it's gotten a little bit better, but I remember missing the bus because I worked at Montana's at the time because I again quit my job. Didn't really have anything else and wasn't in school. So I worked at Montana's. If I missed that bus, I was walking home. So it was about a 2 hour walk. So I would work like 10 to 2, walk home, get home by 4, make dinner, and then we go to practice at like 5, 5:30. So I remember that grind. And I can say, because it was such a small community, literally anybody would pick you up. Like if you hit up one of the boys, anyone would pick you up. You would get, I guess, the access to resources because it was just Prime at that point, before Sean started doing stuff. So it was awesome because I had top-notch training that would not only help me get faster, bigger, maintain, but also recover, which I feel like was huge, just making sure I had those stretch routines, but also I was doing my own stuff. So constantly, it was a not only a full-time job, but it was such a well-structured, I think, junior program, top to bottom. Um, it really helped me, I think, leaving that 2018 season because I'm like, not only did I get better because of the knowledge of Reamer, like you said, of Coach Hawk, but I felt better leaving. I think because of everything that I took away from that program.
Yeah. So, no, the buses have not gotten any better in this town. The buses are still terrible. But to get back into to get back into the season here, we go through the 2018 season. I would say we, underperformed in terms of expectations, based on, like we talked about going in, right? Defending Cullen Cup champs. We have the roster to win the Cullen Cup, to compete for a national championship. And unfortunately, I just feel like for whatever reason we didn't, connect in the right way, on the field, execute at the right time, whatever it may be. We ended up losing in the first round to the Langley Rams, I believe was that season, over in Langley. And a game we didn't get blown out by, a game we were in for a majority of the game, having opportunities, right? But just for whatever reason, not being able to execute at the right moment. So, after that season, what were your kind of final thoughts of, I would imagine, a little bit of, happiness, thankfulness for the experience, for what you're able to build out here, but disappointed that, especially I feel like fans don't realize of the abruptness that it ends, that a football season ends, especially in playoffs. It ends. There's no more practice. There's no guarantee that you're going to, see the boys again. You hopefully can, say your goodbyes. And then I don't know what it was for you. I don't remember exactly if you're one of those guys that, some people are out of town by, you lose on Saturday, they're out of town, middle of the week next week. So it's a very
Yeah.
quick turnaround. So kind of what were your feelings? I'm sure bittersweet, as that final season kind of ended, and just kind of any thoughts going through that season that you want to maybe share as well, Zay?
Yeah. So I was exactly that. We lost. I want to say it was like a Saturday night game or something, down in Langley. And all I remember is, holy crap, Javon Couture is really good. And, we are like done now. So I called my mom and I'm like, hey, like, I don't really know what I'm going to do here. I'm working part time at this restaurant. I kind of want to come home, get ready for school, do what I got to do, to finish up. So I think we booked my flight on, like you said, the Tuesday or the Wednesday. And it was like, now I've got 3 days to go visit Sam, make sure I see Hawk, talk to Reamer, have one more time where I think the boys like play video game because my billet at the time uh, was like, yeah, you guys can like hang out, play PS3 or whatever it was. We played like 2K or something or Madden, and like that was it. It was just like that. And then to this day, I'm fortunate that you and I can still talk because not all of our teammates we can still talk to. And I luckily still keep in touch with Moran because he was my roommate. I'm probably going to have to call him after this. I said, I got to talk to Cole first and then I'll hit you up after. But it was cool coming back, I guess, earlier this year to see all the boys because you don't always get to do that.
Yes, it's the bittersweet, like I mentioned, of just football in general. I feel like any sports season of, you get into playoffs and you're not guaranteed anything after that last practice or walkthrough on Friday. It's kind of the last, people say, this could be the last opportunity this group is together for the last time. And I think people also forget about that as well, and something to cherish. So now that we can kind of get back, let's fast forward a little bit before we rewind into your journey. Talk about the
Yeah.
current Raiders here, because I feel like we lost, our way here a little bit, especially for myself. I remember, being a ball boy, being a water boy back in, 2008, 2009, being around this team for a lot of years, a lot of successful years as well. For me, being a part of a Cullen Cup, team was I don't know if I could say a dream come true, but close to it in terms of being a guy that watched this team, and grew up around this team. And I feel like our kind of few years of 2018, 2019 were the end of kind of those eras, which is a good thing because I feel like you can kind of start something new. Unfortunately for us, there was a few years there that we kind of had to take our lumps to rebuild something now. But I really feel like Coach Sean, a guy that both of us played with, a guy that I grew up with here in Nanaimo, going to, going to John Barsby, me going to NDSS. But You can speak to it a little bit better. I feel like obviously as a team we're all very connected, but you really get connected to those guys in your positional groups, those guys that you spend but you're spending all day with, right? You're not getting away from them in meetings and whatever it may be. You're around those guys all practice all day, so you're really getting to learn those guys and grow a connection with them more. So you kind of learning from Sean, seeing what type of player he was that season. What are kind of your thoughts and kind of gives you, I guess, some confidence here for the Raiders that they can build something, sustainable foundationally with Sean at, as the head coach?
Yeah, no, I love Sean. Sean and I still talk to this day. I'll text him, congratulate him on the win, or tell him to keep his head up, because at the end of the day, like, he's a guy who just works. When I was back in February, I made sure that we sat down, we had dinner, and I kind of went through like some brief overviews for things that he could look at adapting, and reviewed some of the stuff he was thinking about. Defensively, got to talk to Jake. Offensively, even though we're enemies on the field, it's like all love now. And I think, what they got in store, it's something to be excited about here on the island. I feel like all the talk about Sadler, it's like his coming out party against Oki, and then them handling business this past week looks good. Obviously, they've got Paul, but Ruben, I feel like, is taking the BCFC and just running away with it, doing what he's got to do. And then defensively, I feel like every week I'm seeing a new guy step up. Like, I knew Kyle when I was out there, but I'm seeing Denzel, I'm seeing all these other guys like really step up. I'm excited to see kind of what this team is going to do, not only this season, because this is his first, I think, shot at running things and getting it the way he wants and getting to train with them, but over the next 2, 3, 4 seasons, where this team can be, because I think at the helm, you guys got the right guys who are young, excited, who just want to work and compete. And that's kind of the mindset and the attitude we had when we were, on field in Indy. But anytime we always had a DB dinner on the Fridays before a game. So it was all kind of the boys coming together. Used to go to Boston Pizza, grab something, and it was like, they're the same guys. They want to talk ball. It's just a little bit more grown up.
Ohana, man, family for sure. And I miss some of those Friday night dinners with the Hoggies or whatever. Being the quarterbacks, we never got together, but we got to intrude on some other positional group dinners. So we got to fit in where we were welcomed. Um, Lastly, here on kind of CGFL talk, I think from one last perspective, you mentioned him about the Andrew Harris, kind of looking up to him and hey man, like he found a way, right? I think him being back involved with the team and him actually really putting in a lot of work behind the scenes has been a huge help for the organization as well, and just an opportunity to kind of tip my cap here to Andrew and give him some of his credit. I'm actually sitting down with him later today. I know we're not going to post this today's day, but the day of the recording, I'm actually sitting down with Andrew later on kind of a live stream and just picking his brain on kind of the Raiders and kind of just Canadian football in general. So excited for that to happen a little bit later. But lastly, from CGFL and kind of Raiders perspective, I'm curious, a two-part question for you today. If you can kind of talk a little bit about, firstly, the difference you think between kind of the conferences, not to shade any conferences or anything, but just the difference between, not even OFC as well, just the difference between all three conferences and kind of, I feel like different styles as well as different mentalities or whatever you want to call it. And then as well, why should kids, you're obviously a youth sports coach and recommending kids to go that route as well, but it's not exactly made up for everybody, whether like myself, maybe you're not a big school guy, whatever it may be. Why should CGFL be a great path for other kids, other athletes that are growing up that can find a way to whether it be school, professionally, whatever it may be, why the CGFL is a great opportunity for them as well.
For sure, for sure. So I guess to attack your first part of the question, the PFC, I probably have the least amount of knowledge. Like I said, I was recruited there, but I will say the structure in which they came in, they were like, this is where you're going to work. This is the internship you're going to do. This is where we kind of see you. Like, it was very well organized. And I see that from not only Edmonton, but Saskatoon's kind of dominance. I can't really tell you the last time that I've looked up the Hilltops and they've had a bad team. So them not only pushing the competition, but upholding a higher standard, I always feel like that conference itself will strive and continue to do great things, because from very limited interactions, I could always feel like, okay, this coaching staff or these people that are looking at interest in me, I can only imagine how they treat the people that are in the building or in the locker room or on the field. The OFC is slightly different. And like I said, it's just a limited number of resources. I really like looking back now at kind of the success that the London Beefeaters have had over the last little bit, just because when I had it, I Coach V, who has retired, but he was a great coach, great dude, coaching like local high school ball, and then coached for the Beefeaters. And him, like, if ever I see him in passing, it's just all love. Then the other guy that I had was Chris Marshall as my head coach. And he was another guy. Now he's a O-line coach at Western. But again, it was very like, this is the standard. This is how we're going to do it. Was getting guys out there, right? So I think that was my experience there. But I definitely saw how people looked at it as it's a lower conference. You know, it's JUCO when Canada doesn't have JUCO ball. So people are treating it at a lower level of competition. But then I can also look in that conference and see guys who got CFL Combine invites, got the opportunity to go somewhere else. It's really, I'd say, for the OFC as a whole, it's understanding, okay, what matters to me? Am I a guy who just like wants to go to the trades and continue playing ball because I'm young and I love the sport and I want to continue to do it and play ball with my friends before I go play like in a men's league or something like that? Or is it something where it's just like you said, school is not for me. I have no interest in going to university. I just want to work. That's kind of the outlet that's there. So that's why it's always harder, I feel like, to kind of gauge the competition in the OFC. Just, again, there's so many teams in Ontario. If you're one of those guys that ends up on an OFC team, it's not bad, but it's just like that is kind of what happens. The BCFC is a little bit different. And I think I had a positive experience because of the guys that we had around. You know, like I was able to go to University of Toronto. G, I know, had the option to go, I believe it was to Acadia. Chang came from Calgary. Sean, you know, went to Carleton and like balled out there. I know Moran had some interest. Like our entire secondary like had an opportunity to go somewhere. And I feel like you don't look at a lot of teams and be like, yeah, this whole starting crew is going to go to U Sport. So I had a positive experience in that light, and it wasn't, you know, anything different that any coaches had done for me, but it was just how well, like I said, on a day-to-day basis, I knew where I needed to be. I knew I was going to train. And also guys were nipping at my heels, right? It wasn't where we were struggling to get guys to practice. If anything, it was just the buy-in of like that second unit or that third unit was harder because they knew I'm chasing a fifth-year guy that's just going to play because he's better than me. So that's why I think what Sean has right now in the BCFC, that level of competition, like I said, you only have one school in there. You got a bunch of guys who are just hungry coming from Barsby and ND. Like those are two pretty dominant course like schools on the island, just willing to work, right? And whether you get them there, you get them in West Shore, either way, if they're good players, it's just going to bring up the level of competition throughout the entire conference.
Love it. So let's get into your last stop as a player. You obviously head back home. What's take me through that decision? Because like you mentioned, quick turnaround. We end up losing to Langley. You end up going back home before we know it, and then next thing we kind of hear or see from Zay, you're committed to the University of Toronto. You're going to be playing ball there. So us being over here on the island, we're excited for you and rooting for you. So what went into that, and kind of how did you land in U of T?
Yeah, so Coach Mully at the time, he and I were connected when he was at St. FX. So when I remember, like I said, just emailing schools, being like, hey, this is who I am, sending out my tape. And U of T kind of talked to me early. They remembered me, and it made sense just because I was in my kind of fourth and fifth year of school. So I only had a few courses left. They were mainly electives. So I was able to kind of transfer the credits that I took there and transition there. Truthfully, it was just, I looked at the secondary. I'm like, okay, I might have a shot to do it. U of T at the time, we were on the rise, but we didn't really know how the season was going to be. And I was able to find out really early on I could get into school and it was going to make sense for me to continue my degree. My education was the most important thing because I was so close to being done that if I delayed it anymore, my parents were probably just going to like kill me. So I'm like, you know what? Like, I should probably do some of this. I can't just go again back to Nanaimo and not take school. So I did that just because, again, it was fit, it was culture, it was me already seeing eye to eye with the DC and Greg Marshall, the I guess the other Greg Marshall, however you want to view it. Greg Marshall, there's two. So there was
There's
one that
two?
was at U of T. There's two Greg Marshalls. So there's one at Western, and then there's
Yeah.
one who was at U of T. He was at Queens before,
Oh, I didn't know that.
playing the CFL, and now he's coaching with the Ottawa Red Blacks.
Okay.
He's a D-line coach for the Ottawa Red Blacks. So Greg Marshall at the time, again, he was the head coach. So going into that season, I was excited because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have an opportunity. This past game is wild. Like, we had so many receivers. We had a very good quarterback at the time. So I knew I was going to get better going against pretty strong competition. But then ultimately, once I got there, it was hard because I looked across and I saw, Malcolm Campbell, who's this massive defensive end, just came off training camp with the Hamilton Ticats. And I'm looking up at this guy and I'm like, yeah, I'm probably done here. Just because I knew, like, that was my first, I think, realization. Then at the time, I got a girlfriend in Toronto. I was like trying to do it, but I found myself like, not that I was falling out of love with it, but I was upset because I understood like this is probably the end of the road for me.
Yeah.
So I had more DNPs that year than actually plays played in the game. So like, even though I got two dresses, like,
Yeah.
didn't really play. It was a guy who was like smaller dude, didn't really do a lot on specials, and like in the secondary would get in garbage time though. So after that, I racked up a bunch of debt because I went to Toronto. So then I came home, and that was kind of the point where I'm like, I got to hang it up because, again, there's nowhere else for me to play. Um, and again, I started to feel that, when you're like, I got to go to practice, like, it wasn't excitement anymore.
Mhm.
And then that was like a tough thing to deal with because I feel like as athletes, like, everybody in this world dies once, but I feel like an athlete, you die twice. And that's when, like, you actually pass and when your playing career is done. Because it's almost this, you struggle with, what am I doing? What's my identity? Like, you have no idea. So I think that was the hardest part from going to Toronto. But to this day, like, again, I'm so grateful that I did that because there's so many teammates that I still get to, see in passing or stay in contact with because coaching and they're a little bit of everywhere or doing something interesting. So that's what I love, I guess, about social media is that we can still stay connected and all these other people to this day can still stay, locked in.
The thing I always take away too is I 100% agree with you of dying twice. It might sound a little harsh to those that maybe aren't athletes or whatever it may be, but totally true. And kind of the reason why I started the podcast, to be honest. Kind of not, I wouldn't say a crisis, but having those thoughts, kind of identity thing, and kind of getting after COVID there, of everyone feeling a little bit restless and whatever. And I figured, I love ball. I love talking ball as well, right? And this is kind of an opportunity for me to just, like I was talking to you off air, of like we're going to Kamloops and playing a game. We're at the back of the bus, just shooting the shit, and a way for me to
Yeah.
kind of stay involved, and stay, in the game, stay around other players and stuff like that. I don't remember who said it, but I remember, maybe it was Sam or something like that. If you're anywhere in the country playing, junior football, playing football, more often than not, you can kind of find a teammate or someone that you've crossed paths with, and
Yeah.
you can call them up, and if you're in a pinch, you need a couch to crash on. You need, hey, I'm stuck in, Ottawa, Ontario, Zay, I need you to come get me, or I need some help. I can kind of hit you up, and if I'm in a situation like that, have a brother, and that'll be able to lend a hand. And I find that super cool about football, and the reason why I kind of gravitated towards football, just being around your brothers all the time, and kind of growing those bonds. So definitely agree that it's such a tough ending because you're so used to going to practice and going to film and stuff like that, and getting into, OTAs and off-season training and stuff like that. And then when it's not happening and stuff like that, and then COVID ends up happening, I remind a lot of people that, I'm very thankful, but as well, it's kind of a selfish thankful because I obviously didn't have to go through the whole COVID thing of, not being around my teammates if I was in high school, being, having things like prom and stuff like that taken away, having, football seasons taken away if we were in that situation. So just a bittersweet situation for sure. But your football career ends up coming to an end, like you mentioned. You end up transitioning. I believe you went back to school, finished your degree, and then got into the coaching realm here a couple years ago in 2022. So how did that door open, and kind of what sparked that interest for you?
Yeah. So I think it was like similar interest. Believe it or not, I reached out to some of my summer ball coaches when I was living in London. So graduate. So 19, I finished at Toronto. 2020 hits, and the world goes crazy in March. So I graduate school, but all my exams are online, which is amazing because I'm like, oh, I'm done school. So I just work because again, racked up a lot of debt in Toronto. So I'm just working, and then I get a full-time job at a bank. So then I'm doing that, and I'm just like, yeah, like whatever. I kind of like, you start to talk to yourself, be like, yeah, I kind of like the money. I'm kind of doing this. I end up moving to Windsor, getting an apartment so I can be closer to my friends, and it makes sense. And then 21 things kind of open up, and I'm like just starting to like train kids because I had a mutual friend that connected me. So I get certified in speed and agility, and I start doing that. So nothing to do with football at all. I'm just like training like hockey athletes, basketball players, a couple football players, but like nothing, just at a gym, a local gym. And then fall of 21, so I'm still doing this again. Same buddy in my ear, like, yo, are you gonna coach? Like, I want to, but where? He's like, do you reach out to Glenn Mills? So my coach back in grade 10 and grade 11. And I'm like, no. So I just call him. I text him and I call him. I'm like, hey, like, I have interest in coaching. These guys are like very throughout the season. Like this might be like week 6 or 7. Like you don't need coaches at this point. So he's like, if you want, just come out to practice. Like, okay. So I show up to practice 20 minutes early, like introduce myself, walking around. See, he's like, oh, go over there and just help this coach. So I do that. I say one thing to like the coach at the time, and he's like, listen to this guy. He knows what's going on. I have no idea what's going on. Like I just walked in, like I said, off the couch, just like learning how to coach and telling people, because that's how I would have done it as a player. So fast forward, they switched me from assistant DB coach to assistant linebacker coach for a fall team because Windsor didn't have high school football that year. So coaching that, and we do pretty well. We end up winning this fall season. It was kind of reduced because not all teams had that same situation where they didn't have high school football. So not every team is in it. We end up dominating on our way to win this championship. Feeling good. I'm part of a team, coaching linebackers, kind of learning it as I go. Then the banquet hits. So we have a banquet kind of early in 22 for Essex that I coached. I'm planning on coaching the spring season with Essex, so spring summer season with Essex, and I'm going to be coaching the U16. So I've been kind of grade 9s, grade 10s, coaching DBs as well as like co-defensive coordinating. And at this banquet, the person that's there is the offensive coordinator of University of Windsor, Joe Circelli. So Joe comes up to me because we kind of waved. We knew each other. He knew my family because he knew my brother. So we're talking. He's like, how you been? How's your brother? Whatever. And we're talking. He's like, what you been up to? And I tell him, I'm like, I'm coaching here, working at a bank. I love it. He's like, well, why don't you come out to spring camp? So I come out to spring camp. Again, not expecting anything. I'm still learning, still trying to teach myself, how to coach, how to be better. And I meet, Patrick Donovan at the time. I kind of show him, I'm here to help. Whatever you need. They already have 2 DB coaches. So I'm literally just this third guy that's just out here. And he's like, yeah, just help him out. So I just go help him out, do whatever. And then I'm asked to come back for the fall season. So it's really just fluke, just being right place, right time, and just asking, doing a good job, and sticking around. So now I'm going into my 3rd season at the University of Windsor, but all of those things happen based on pure luck, me just being in situations, because that ended up being my last season coaching with Essex, my first season coaching with Windsor. And like I said, I was the third guy in there. So they already had two DB coaches. And then kind of now we end up here.
Right place, right time though, man. I also feel like I don't know if you're a big believer in like I might forgive me if I sound a little weird, but karma as well. I feel like you put good energy out in the world, you work hard, right? I feel like these opportunities, it might seem random and it might it just landed at my feet like that, right? But I feel like these things kind of come back to you. You're working hard, you're grinding, you're going to school, you're trying to work and stuff like that, paying back your debt, and these opportunities, are kind of paid back to you in a sense. I feel like in a way, so it's super cool to hear that, and that's something that comes to mind when I hear that. So, third season you said at the University of Windsor. Now, how cool is it for you to kind of witness, the resurgence, I guess, if you want to call it that, of Windsor? Of, you guys been pretty competitive here in the last few years in the OUA conference, and I would imagine you guys have big plans and expectations for this upcoming season.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, it's just a testament to kind of what the Cercelli family has done. How great of a defensive coordinator I think Coach Donovan is, and kind of what they do. They instill this culture that, similar to the Raiders, similar to a lot of places that I've had stops, it's family, it's Ohana, it's everything. So you make sure that when you're in the building, you're working and you're upholding that expectation. Because similar to my upbringing, your parents are the ones that push you to get to this point. So I'm going to look at you as my, little brother, just because I'm not that old, and just be like, I'm going to push you just because I expect more of you. And I really think that is what we've seen to grow, just that culture shift. And that's why we were able to do a lot of great things that they haven't done in, nearly 50 years. And this season, it's good because we're going to have, probably a similar roster. The only unfortunate part is the rest of OUA and rest of U Sports is in the same boat. So it'll be difficult. It'll be a difficult schedule, but I'm excited at least to see it, because now this is my third season with this group, and the guys that were with me that came in essentially my rookie year back in 22. It's awesome. It's awesome because there's no, the buy-in's there, the expectations there, how my coaching style, they already know it all. So now it's really like, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to continue to be okay and good, or are we going to push to be great? And that's going to come down to me being better, and as well as these guys kind of continuing to work.
And I think that's how you establish a culture as well, right? Like you mentioned about some of those guys coming in, if you want to call it your rookie season as a coach, now you're in year three, and those guys are kind of, implementing the standards that you've set in the last previous years to the rookies that are coming in for them, right? And kind of teaching them, how your standard goes, our practice, and individual periods and stuff like that, how you can't dog it. So super cool. I'm definitely excited to keep an eye on the Windsor Lancers this year. And one thing I enjoy about the OUA is that you don't have to pay to stream the games. Unlike the Canada West, which is a little bit, that's a story for another day, but we'll definitely keep an eye on you guys this year. So before we get into kind of more of a preview type thing on the 2024 season, I'm curious about your opportunity that you got this spring. I'd imagine the humble guy that you are, you're probably trying to play it off as luck, but how did this opportunity come about as well? And maybe did, some more karma / hard work kind of pay off for you getting the opportunity to, I believe some sort of coaching internship with the Ottawa Red Blacks this training camp, really kind of get your feet wet and kind of dive into, the coaching side of things, professional coaching side of things. So how cool was that? And how did that, opportunity come about?
So just to clarify, I'm not allowed to say that it was lucky that I got this.
Good. I'm glad. You worked hard for
yeah. No, it was cool. It was a cool experience. So I guess last year I was honored to take home the champion of equity, diversity, and inclusion in the OUA. So that award is awarded to somebody who takes time and energy, not only in their sport, but outside of their sport in the community, and looks to represent kind of those three major areas in their community. So based on the work that I did with my previous employment with the bank, as well as just the work that I've done, kind of help supporting, Black kids, the BIPOC community, making sure that I'm aware, I'm seeing when it comes to both, the South African side and the Filipino side of it, and empowering, young emerging leaders. It was something that I always wanted to continue to do and was really second nature. So there was a program called Diversity in Football that the CFL runs every year. What happened was I applied to it actually back in February. So just after I kind of came out to the island. So wasn't really expecting much of it. And they said they would let you know by the end of March. So in my eyes, I applied at the end of February and then heard radio silence. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm just going to coach at Windsor. It's going to be all good, blah, blah, blah. I'm sitting at my desk. So I used to work as a personal banker. So I'm sitting at my desk and I get a call on my personal cell. It's from Robert Dice. And I'm like, who's like, why does this client want to call me? Like, I've got a desk phone here, whatever. So I answer the phone again, my own ignorance. So I answer the phone. I go, hello. They're like, this is Bob Dice of the Ottawa Red Blacks. So then I fumble my phone quickly, pick it up. I'm just like, hi, how's it going? So he schedules a Teams interview for me the next day. So then I ran into my manager's office and I go, listen, this is what just happened. I need to take this interview. I'm expecting yes and only yes. She goes, okay. Go back, continue doing what I'm doing. And from the second we hop on and he sees my face, it's nothing but, class. It feels organic. He's nothing but an authentic human who literally just wants to talk ball. And all I did the night before was like research. Like, okay, I need to know this about the program. I need to know this about his career, blah, blah, blah. I'm like reaching out to people who may know him. They're just like, chill out, man. So he offers me this position. Here's the catch. The position runs from early May until June 1st. I've already blown through 2 weeks of vacation at my full-time job. So I got to go now after I just asked for this interview to my employer and go, hey, so this is what I just was offered. I'm going to take it, but I would love your support for an unpaid leave. Unfortunately, I do not actually get that granted. And I ultimately decided to quit my job and walk away from the bank and take this internship in Ottawa. So it was like one of those things where weight on my shoulders. I'm stressed just because I'm a constant overthinker. And I take the opportunity and it was like nothing but great. Like I'm learning from, Baron Miles is a Hall of Famer, Alex Huber, who it's like a guy who understands the game, not only offensively, but defensively. And then Coach Dice, who it's like the special teams mind and the excellence of him. It was nothing but just great leadership. And I think the biggest thing that I took away was everyone in that building, it kind of attests to their success right now. Everybody has a role. Everybody does it exceptionally well, efficiently. And that's it. They just continue to do it, right? There's no magic recipe. They just continue to work and outwork. Everyone's got a specific role and they do it to the best of their ability at all times. And the only reason I know this is because this was the first practice where I needed to shower after every practice. I'm sprinting to everything. And like, I can only imagine as a player, but as a coach, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is the energy that needs to happen. It was just infectious. So learning not only the football size of it, but learning from the personnel department, learning from the head coach, learning from, special teams guys. Everybody kind of gave me the time of day. But I will say the biggest transition was in pro ball. There's really I feel like any successful business, but it's like, you don't really know if you're doing well. And I mean that with like all due respect, nothing but love for Ottawa because they took me in and they taught me so much. But it's like, you don't know what's going, like you're just working because that's just what you have to do. And we're in training camp. So it's 12 to 15-hour days. So that's already it. But then after that, the standard, because of what you're doing, like you feel the self-reward. So even if there was ever a time where I wasn't there, I'd come back and I think I got the reassurance and the humility, but also the joy from the players. Oh, coach, we thought you left us. I'm like, no. I'm still here, boys. Like I got another week. So I think that was cool, like just how they were able to take me in. It wasn't just like I'm pencil pushing, but I'm actually doing things for purpose. I feel purpose because I'm working with the players at a higher level than I've ever seen. Um, and just how, successful organizations run.
I would imagine a lot of those days are probably like drinking from a fire hydrant or something like that. You're just trying to go with the amount of you're going this way, that way, transitioning drills and all that sort of stuff. But glad to hear that it sounds like you landed on your feet, buddy, and also cool. For me to hear like essentially, you pretty much bet on yourself too, right? With obviously, having to be a man, have responsibilities, paying your bills and stuff like that. I feel like I can kind of walk away from this opportunity to take a new one, and hopefully, like you have, land on your feet on the other side and kind of keep on pushing. So I'm curious as we get into this upcoming season for the Windsor Lancers, what will you take maybe from this experience and try to, implement it into your kind of, coaching style, or maybe just what did you add into your toolbox from this experience that you're going to take moving forward?
Well, I was very thankful, at least because Corey Grant, who's another, again, like great leader, he's the head coach of the Carleton Ravens. He made sure he's like, hey, like, this is what I'm doing for my staff. And like, I think it'd be beneficial to you. I made a presentation and presented it for probably like, I think it really only should have been an hour, but me and John Paul probably talked for about 4 hours that day, just about everything that I took home, all the way from, what did I do while I was there? What responsibilities should I have as well as the support staff? But where can we get better? And I think that was the biggest thing where I looked at a whole organizational view, because I feel like as a positional coach, you may feel like, I only have some say. But if you look at your position as your team that you run, it's just as, I guess, self rewarding, because those players feel how much you care and they feel how much that you're going to dedicate to them. So for me, all I took was the pace of play that I got to run at is got to be much higher. The level of instruction needs to be so much simpler, so that way we can run at a faster pace. And any additional time that I have, I need to ask core guys, like, do they understand what's going on? Because our defensive coordinator does so much for us and he's so strong at his role. It's like the last thing I want to do is overwhelm him. Our recruiting coordinator, he's done a great job over the last couple of years. Let's make sure that I'm able to help with the knowledge that I gained from player personnel, how we evaluate talent, how do we organize it, how do we give it to our head coach in an effective manner. At the last point is like, how many of these problems or maybe issues that we have throughout the season that our head coach has to take on, how many of them can I handle, just by addressing it head on? And I think all of those things, that's not only like coaching, that's teaching, that's administrated. Like there was so much more that I looked at coaching where I'm like, oh, I'm not actually on field coaching. But again, in my last, 2 seasons, that's all I really felt like I had to do. Coach on the field, maybe do a little bit of film study with our DC, and that was really it. The more I get into the world, I'm realizing like these guys do so much for whoever is across from them. And you only know what you know. So it's like, how do I empower the guys who are my assistants or other assistants who want to go somewhere? Just taking the time, having conversations, and making sure they feel, empowered or important for what they do. Because at the end of the day, everything is important. It's just how much effort and communication you want to put into it.
Yeah, man, I love that. Personally, the phrase has been thrown around quite a bit of, football being the ultimate team sport. And that's personally why I love the game so much, of just how much you need a team, you need an organization to really be successful and help you, win a lot of games and be successful. So cool to also hear of you kind of looking yourself in the mirror and having some maturity as well. Of, how could I get better from this experience? I'm sure you could have very easily, went back to your old ways and I'm in an intern program ship for a reason. I could kind of fall back on my ways when you took this opportunity to get better, learn some other ways to teach and be a better coach. So super cool, and just something that I would expect from a guy like you as well, to just learn from the experience and keep getting better. So let's get finally Zay. I told Zay off camera here we'd keep him for maybe about 40 minutes. It's hour and 15 now, so hopefully we won't keep Zay too much longer. But Zay, let's get into this upcoming season now, man. 2024 for the Windsor Lancers. Last few years have been, very successful, like you said, some great years here. and a lot of returning guys, right? I believe I saw you put up a stat or whatever, number one rushing team in the OUA, I believe. I know you're more so on the defensive side, so maybe we'll start there. Let's start on defensive, I guess. What's kind of the outlook, I guess, if you want to call it, going into this year? Who are maybe some guys that you're looking to lean on as far as leadership and just how you think that side of the ball will do this upcoming season?
You really twist my arm here, eh? Trying to
Yeah,
wake
I
up.
had to.
No, defensively, I think I did a lot of great stuff last year. Number one pass defense. I think we were top three when it came to sacks. So it's one of those things where I'm excited because I feel like, especially on the edge, having a guy like Claude Musin, he's extremely dominant. He was able to be a first team All Canadian. Having Mufta Jelly, he's another guy where it's like in the middle, just like a wrecking ball. And Demir Tagani and Liam Hoskins are two guys who it's like had success, were able to go to the East West Combine, perform, and do a good job. Our linebacking core is led by Devin Versek. He's a guy going into his upper year, just a combine freak, and was able to make so many tackles, not only defensively but special teams. I'm really excited to see what he does on a full year. And then in our secondary, we return pretty much everybody. So it'll be good to really see kind of how that all comes to mind. Istaman Asibo Dadsi was one of those guys where it's like he hasn't really gotten his flowers over the last little bit, and it was really awesome for us because, again, third season with the guy now, him to really step up at that boundary corner position, lock it down the way he has, having one of a lower completion percentage against him, and really using his physicality, I feel like is one of those things where you don't see that combination of a guy who's as built but able to run with kind of that X or that number one receiver. And then we got a lot of like older guys as well. I know people have talked about Ethan John, but I try not to because he'll talk about himself. But he led our team in tackles last year at the strong safety position. I think he's going to take the OUA again by storm and make sure that he lets you hear about it.
All right, so flipping over on the offensive side of the ball, getting to go against those guys every day. I know you get a good look at them and build those competition periods up, but at the same time, right, as soon as you guys are kind of done those periods, you break down with your boys, and at the end of the day, your teammates. So having that opinion of the offense, what are kind of you seeing from the offensive side of the ball? Forgive me, I should have looked this up, but does Danny have any eligibility? I know he's kind of been in and out as quarterback for Windsor here, but is Danny going to be returning as the quarterback for the squad?
Danny Skelton is returning for us. He still got some time. He just came off his internship with Calgary because that's where he's from. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that all shapes out. Just in the quarterback room, I don't have a lot to say there, so I'm just gonna be impartial and really let the offensive guys work and let them do what they got to do. I think the most exciting thing is really like our running back room. Like there's not a lot of teams where I can look back and be like, we got, I don't know how many guys that can just carry the rock and make something special happen. Having Joey Zorn after his third season now with us, Christopher John, depending on what he wants to do, he's another big body that kind of complements that Thunder Lightning duo. Weekday Mumbo, he was a guy who last year, it's like every time he touched the ball, something special happened, and Liam Talbot can kind of do a little bit of everything. Those four guys, knowing like week in, week out, defensively, I'm going to have to game plan in practice just to make sure we slow these guys down. Otherwise, again, they're going to let me hear about it. That'll be tough. And then receiving wise, I feel like we got a lot of young guys where it's like, we'll see what happens. I think the biggest thing right now is like to really show like the development and what Coach, Randy Beardy has done with that O-line. Having three guys really get an opportunity out there. It's been awesome, with, Anuna, Morgan, and Mueller. All of those guys are just a testament to like how well they have been coached, how talented of a group they are. And I feel like the next man up in that room is really just going to be something special. But you're not getting any other secrets from me. I can't talk too much on the offensive side.
I'm glad you mentioned Una. I obviously became a little bit familiar with his game this off season, and um, I by no means like to be the guy that uh, clamors on, this guy's going to be great because of his highlight video. Obviously, as we're both well aware, highlight videos only show the highlights instead of some of the lowlights, some of the misplays and stuff like that, mistakes throughout a season. But preparing my kind of prospects to watch whatever series that I had on the channel this off season, threw on George's highlight tape, and kind of right away was very impressed, and kind of blown away. Him and Dumoulin Duguay out of Laval, kind of two guys that I thought would transition to the program pretty well. George, I believe, got activated for the first time, was on the active roster a few weeks ago. It's been a majority of the year as kind of that undressed player, but I think a guy that the Lions can really utilize here in the next few years as an actual full-time starter, a Canadian that's, as we both know, is super valuable to add as an asset, and be a very meaningful contributor. So I'm curious. You talked about the three offensive linemen, guys going to the East-West Bowl and stuff like that. I know a lot of the responsibility and stuff like that as a university is to educate these guys and make sure school is first. But why should if prospects are in wherever they may be, consider Windsor as a place that they can develop into a professional prospect as well. Not only get the education that they deserve and get that aspect as well, but get the coaching, get the resources, and get the eyes on them as well. So what do you think Windsor's doing in that aspect? Doing well in that aspect.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think it's really just a testament to our coaches. Coach Coach Cercelli, Coach Cercelli, so both Coach Joe and Coach JP, as well as Coach Beardy. Like I feel like what they've done in developing the O line. If you're an O lineman who wants to come in, you want to work, you want to play football, you want to go to school, you want to fish. This is the place for you, just because that's what we're doing here. We're not doing too much else. There's no magic recipe. We just got guys who are just hungry, who want to work day in, day out. Um, and because it's Windsor, there's a ton of good Italian food spots. So like that's my little plug there. Um, and then I'll say, when it comes to the secondary, I forgot to mention this guy, but I shouldn't. Seeing Brett McDougall get 2 shots kind of with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers has been awesome. Um, so I can really say anybody who's there in the secondary, looking for an opportunity. If you're a guy who wants to get pushed, you want to take your game to the next level, and you want to get high level instruction. That's what I'm here for. I make sure that these DBs can hit me up. I got guys who may text me or try to call me at midnight, and I'm like, okay, I'm sleeping, leave me alone. But I'm gonna make sure I answer because I want these guys to know that like I'm here for them as a player. I want them to look at me because I didn't always have, a coach who not only looked like me, um, but was able to understand me and take the time out of his day to make sure that he cared and dedicated for me. And the end of the day, that's kind of what we're building here. It's really just a place where, again, we love, we serve, we care. We show that by giving up our value, which is time. And when it's time to work, you hit the end of the 401, you blue collar, gold swag, and you just get after it.
Love to hear it. So I'm glad you mentioned about contact information. If anybody's watching the podcast here today, out in BC, out in Ontario, wherever it may be, how can they get a hold of you, or who can they get a hold of in terms of, maybe wanting to be interested in hearing more about what Windsor has to offer?
Yeah, for sure. You guys can hit me up. I won't pass it off to somebody else. I'll take it full fledged. But my Instagram, I'll make sure that I pass that off to you, to
I'll
Cole.
put it in the link.
But yeah, it's Isaiah. It's at Isaiah _Johns. My Twitter is at Coach Z Johns. And then my email is just my first name dot last name at uwindsor.ca. So I'm accessible to you guys. Like I said, if you got questions about our program, or even you just want to talk ball, as you can see, I'll talk Cole's ear off for hours and hours. So that's just what I'm here to do.
All right, Zay, last question for you here today. Personally, why I kind of dove back into the podcast, I guess maybe you're not familiar. For those that aren't familiar about my story, is kind of, played Canadian football, obviously, got out of it. I started the Coast to Coast Gridiron podcast last season, where I kind of covered, all sorts of football, NFL, CFL, the whole ordeal. And then coming into the 2023 fall, I had an opportunity to go to my first UBC game, taking a U Sports game live, and then kind of really not gaining much traction in the being a big NFL fan, Bills fan, not really gaining much traction. So I kind of was thinking of how I could kind of pivot or kind of how I can grow a little bit more. And I thought about Canadian football and how underrated it is, number one, and how good it is, number two, how good of a quality it is. And me specifically playing in the CGFL and stuff like that, realizing a lot of the time that there's not a talent issue in a lot of the CGFL and stuff like that. There's a lot of good players. They just for whatever reason get lost in the transition. But why should people for me, why should people? I kind of wanted to spotlight Canadian football a little bit more, so that's why I transitioned out of the coast to coast gridiron and just solely named it Canadian Football Fanatics, where I would cover all things Canadian football and really focus on that, because I felt like that was an area where there wasn't kind of up to NFL standards, where everybody down south, everybody and their mom has a podcast talking about the Chicago Bears if they're in whatever state or whatever. Whereas I know the OUA has a good thing with, I believe it's the 55-yard podcast. Persevere does a good job covering U Sports and stuff like that, but there's still not, I feel like, not enough compared to NCAA, JUCO, whatever. Maybe we're seeing Last Chance U series is on Netflix and stuff like that on JUCO, where we're seeing in UBC I was able to watch Theo Benedette and I don't know why I'm forgetting Giovanni Manu.
Yeah.
Both getting opportunities in the NFL, right? We're seeing guys in the OUA get opportunities in the NFL, stuff like that. So I realized that we're really not that far away. So why not kind of spotlight this a little bit more and kind of get these guys on here to share my platform with them to kind of expose them a little bit more. So why should people not only tune into OUA football on Saturdays? It's free, but why should in general people consume maybe football on Friday, Saturday nights? We hear a lot of people up here in Canada that once September comes around, college football starts, they kind of put U Sports, CGFL, CFL on the back burner, right? Where I feel like maybe slightly it should be the other way around, where I know a lot of these people have ties long term. Some of these fans are 50, 60 years old. They've been watching the Bills for however long. But why not support our own and some of these athletes that are going to the NFL eventually? Nathan Rourke's and stuff like that. And we're not only seeing the quarterbacks as well, we're seeing different skill position players, offensive linemen, etc. So why should people consume more Canadian football?
Yeah, I think it's really the appreciation for the game. Like I'm not ignorant to the fact, like NCAA, especially with the game dropping, because I hear about it all the time, even though I don't have a PS5. So that's at one point in my future. I'm not ignorant to the fact that like the NCAA is dominant, and that's kind of what consumes majority of time on Saturdays. It was unfortunate I didn't get to watch as much college ball as I may have in the past, just based on our schedule being kind of what it is. But I think it's just the appreciation for Canadian football, kind of like why you got into it, right? When the CFL season kind of transitions out, or there may not be CFL games, like you said, do you want to see the next guy who might get an opportunity to play in the CFL? He see his story. Do you have like a family member, a cousin, whatever, that's playing for a OUA program, and you want to see how that works? If you're a young coach and you want to like get into like how do the universities run things, seeing different schemes on YouTube, on OUA TV, how does that affect you, right? Like it's more that part. It's such a niche system and ecosystem in itself that if you want to watch Canadian football, it's out there, but you just got to make sure you seek it, because I really just think it's that appreciation. It's something that we don't realize that we have at our disposal until you really tap into it. So that's kind of why I think even if we're not playing, I have no problem throwing on the game just to watch it, because it's like, I just want to watch good Canadian football.
Good football. Love it. Great answer. I should have known you'd hit us with the last great answer. But Zay, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Like I said, nothing too serious, nothing to be too nervous about. Hour and a half talking ball, man. I really enjoyed just catching back up with you. I know it's been a few years, I would say. I was going to say a few months, but it's been a few years. Keeping in touch on social media, but I know you've been busy in the coaching realm, man. So just like I said, rooting for you from out west here and following your story, man. I wish you nothing but the best, and really looking forward to the next time we're able to talk. That being said, though, I'm gonna have to maybe get some Windsor gear or something out west and rep you guys during the season and on the show. When not too sure how much time I'm gonna spend with the OUA and stuff like that, but I will be with the weekly show on Wednesday nights. We'll be including some U Sports throughout the show. My kind of plan was to more specifically talk about the Canada West, since they kind of really haven't, they don't really have a platform like the 55 yard podcast and stuff like that. And then as well, just me being out west, being able to go to UBC games a lot more often. The plan is to cover Canada West / U Sports, but I plan on kind of doing a weekly recap of the U Sports action and stuff like that. So I hopefully will talk about some big Windsor dubs this season. But I'll hit you up after the show, man, and I'll have to get maybe get you to send me out some packages or something like that to rep the squad on the podcast. And looking forward to watching you guys this year, man. I know, like you talked about earlier, the OUA having so many teams and stuff like that usually takes up a lot of the talent in the province there. Deep province. I like to push back a little bit on the OUA being the most depth conference in Canada. I feel like Canada West is up there as well, but I know there's a lot of good teams in the OUA, and you guys will be up to the task to give them a run for their money this year. So, Zay, man, I appreciate you jumping on the podcast, talking some ball today, buddy. And maybe we'll get you on later in the season if Windsor's doing well. You got some time. I know it's once the season starts next week, you get into camp. It's pretty much go season until October, November. Hopefully, you guys are representing the OUA this year. I would love to see that. But Zay, until next time, buddy. Any last final thoughts? You can maybe get the people your social media again where they can find you.
Yeah, no, for sure. So Instagram's at Isaiah _Johns. Twitter's at Coach Z, so Z Johns. And then my email is just isaiah.johns@uwindsor.ca. Hit me up there if there's any questions or anything you guys need. And honestly, no, I appreciate everything you're doing. And this is awesome, honestly, to get to talk ball. And, I didn't think I was that big a deal to actually get to, chop it up with you for an hour and a half. But I'm thankful in any way that I can continue to support. I'm all ears. I'm all for it.
Of course, brother. We'll talk soon. This won't be the last time for sure. I'd love to get you back on the podcast and just pick your brain as well. Hopefully, you have more opportunities down the road. So that was Isaiah Zay Johns, Coach Zay Johns. We'll say officially, Coach Johns. But if you guys enjoyed today's episode number 33. We should be releasing this around, I would say, the time their training camp kicks off. So a few weeks before the Windsor season is underway. So if you guys are tuning in today, hope you guys are able to enjoy this and get ready for the Windsor Lancers season. Episode 33 already down. For those that are enjoying Canadian football fans, you guys can enjoy our weekly show every Wednesday night, as well as any BC Lions fans tuning in. Hopefully some Windsor Lancers alum that are maybe wanting to hear about George Una out in BC. We do the preview show every week. We upload it usually about the day before the Lions game, and then the preview or the recap show we do live after every BC Lions game. So you guys can catch our content there. When you guys subscribe to the channel, please hit the notification bell. You guys will get notified every single time we upload any sort of content here on the channel, whether that be a live show, a video, a podcast episode like this one here today. So until further ado, we will see you guys next Wednesday night on the live show. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next one.